All right, welcome on back, everyone, to this episode of First CSP, the channel dedicated to bringing you the first Council Shoulder Patch issue from all councils in Scouting America, both past and present. And today we turn our attention to Utah National Parks 591. This was a council that was originally created in 1936 as the merger of Bryce Canyon Council and Timpanogos Council, and then existed all the way up until 2020 when it merged with Great Salt Lake and Trapper Trails to form Crossroads of the West. We've got a couple of varieties here of the first issue, S1A and B, to take a look at, as well as a couple other early patches from Utah National Park. So let's head on over to the patch table. We can see the first issue here is defined by its orange border, blue sky, and specifically 9mm high name. So the length of these characters is going to be 9mm. It's going to be fairly easy to tell the difference between that S1A defining characteristic and the S1B, which has 7mm high council letters. It does appear as though many of the early CSPs from Utah National Parks did have multiple production runs, and we have some of that to be able to show to you today as well. So we have just one example in our collection of the S1A, which is the larger font for Utah National Parks here at the top. Really great scene. I do like the colors in this patch. Super pretty, super vibrant. It looks just as good as it does on camera here in person. And now we can compare that to one of our S1Bs. The S1B is essentially going to look like the same patch. The colors are pretty close as far as resembling. Might think that the 591 Council here text looks a little thinner. We are going to see that this is much smaller with the 7mm high letters for Utah National Parks in the top. But the same orange border, blue sky, and it is primarily determined to be an S1B by the size of that text. Here's the back of our S1B. Let's put the other S1A up here up top. So you see we get the very large Utah National Parks. So the height of those letters is quite a bit larger than on the S1B, which has just the 7mm high letters. Let's see if I can make sure both those titles are on there together. You can kind of compare the two. It does look like the blue here in the S1A is maybe a little bit lighter, but there is probably going to be some variation because there are multiple production runs. We know at least on the S1B, because I have another S1B right here. So both of these are S1Bs, and we can tell the difference a little bit looking at the back. Here, almost the entire back is coated in plastic. Here it looks like there's some plastic along the lettering. I don't know if that's a difference in this was the same production run and one just got a better plastic backing than the other. But to me, it does look as if the production is slightly different. Obviously, the lock stitching here going all the way into the back, whereas the lock stitching on this one is clear. So we have clear lock stitching versus a solid orange lock stitch. But what differentiates these early patches, the S1s from later issues, is there is no fleur-de-lis in the center. So both of these are going to be S1Bs. It just looks like we have multiple production runs that were done. And both of these are going to have 7mm high letters. Let me kind of just sneak in the S1A over the top here, and you can see the distinct difference in size of the letters for the A, which is up here at the top, versus both of these B's. Now the S2 patch that they produced was actually an error. They wanted to add the fleur-de-lis to this design for their next patch, but it came back from the manufacturer with a purple sky. Unfortunately, we don't happen to have that in our collection, but we do have the next issue where they did get the correct blue sky, but adding that fleur-de-lis at the center. This is the S3. So again, it does appear that they've gone back to the larger, basically 9mm text for the top there. It's not a distinctive feature on this because it's not compared to any other CSPs. There's not multiple varieties here. If it's got the blue sky and the yellow fleur-de-lis, then it is going to be an S3. Show you the back on this one. This one also appears to have clear lock stitching around the edging. But this too went through multiple editions. Here we have another S3, which has a much thicker text on it. And we can see the sky obviously is a lot more pale here. It's a lot more vibrant in the later edition. But this too would be an S3. So this is just another example. We've had a couple examples on the channel where there are multiple production runs of a single issue. These are both considered S3s. The previous two were both considered S1Bs, but they have some minor variations because it was produced multiple runs. So it gives you a little example there. Add that nice fleur-de-lis in the center, and that will give you the S3. If you had this and had a very dark purple sky, that is the S2. We do hope to add that to our collection at some point, but being an error, there are not as many were made, and it's a little harder to track down. So we'll get that at some point and hopefully be able to share it with you either here or on our X account. But we'll finish out putting back up that very first edition and one of our S1B. So S1A here at the top with the large text, S1B there at the bottom. Hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give it the thumbs up, like. Feel free to share it with others. And we'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Till then, hope you guys have a great day.